Hey guys, today I'm going to teach you all about CSS, what it is, how to use it, and what it's for. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets. It's called cascading because it follows a cascading, which is to say top to bottom style of following instructions. Um, and it's called style sheets because it controls the style of your web page. Um, The way that it's written is it consists of selectors, which select certain parts of an HTML document, paired with attributes and values. An attribute is a certain thing about the document that you might want to change, such as the color of the text or the thickness of the border around an element or the background color of an element. All of those things are attributes. And the value is what you are setting that attribute as, such as the background color of this element will be set to light blue. In that case, light blue would be the value. The selector is a certain part of the document that you want that attribute and value to be applied to, such as P would be all paragraph elements. When you put those all together, a selector, attribute, and value together is called a rule. You can apply multiple rules to a single selector, and that is called a rule set. So the general syntax of CSS is selector and then followed by curly brackets. And inside the curly brackets, you would put an attribute followed by a colon and then a value followed by a semicolon. And usually each attribute value pair is written on a new line. And you know which attribute value pairs belong to which selector based on which curly bracket set they're in. For example, if you wanted to apply certain style rules to all header 1 elements, the first set, the first rule set would not actually do anything. It wouldn't work. It's just a template. The second one would though. It would set the text color of all header 1 elements to magenta, the background color to pink, which is a lighter pink color, and the margin to auto, which is it would make all of the margin sizes the same. Here are some attributes that you might want to play around with today. Color changes the text color. That one's pretty self-explanatory. Background color changes the background color. Um, in the case of image elements, the background color is not visible unless you give it a padding, and I'll explain what that is in a bit. Text decoration changes elements that contain text. It changes whether the text is underlined, strike through. There's even a value called overline, which puts a line over it. Looks a little strange, but if you want to use that, you can. Font family changes the font. If you want to change the font, that's how you do it. Font size changes the font size. The value must be a number of pixels. Border puts a border around the element, and it requires 3 values in this order. It requires the thickness in pixels, then the style of the border, and then the color. Margin puts a space between this element and other elements, and there are so many more. There are hundreds of CSS attributes that you can apply to an element, and this is just scratching the surface. A pseudo class is a certain qualifier or a certain state for an element. It usually is a selector and then a colon and then a pseudo class of that selector. For example, the first paragraph element or the last paragraph element or a paragraph element when the mouse is hovering over it. Those are example of pseudo classes. In that case, you would write them, the attributes and value pairs you would write the same, but the selector would be written differently. This is how you would write two different states for a button. This would make a button background color be blue before you hover over it, so that would be the button's normal state. But when the button has the mouse over it, the background color would change to light blue. So this gives the button a hover state. So there's two selectors, two rule sets. One for the button when it's not hovered, and one for the button when it is hovered. The only difference here is the background color changes, but you can change as much as you want. All right, let's try some of this stuff out in a REPL. I'm going to use the blog post that we used in the previous lesson, but if you want, you can create a new REPL. I just figure it's easier to use a project that we've already created. Now this looks like it was created in 1995, so let's improve it just a little bit. So we have a header 1 element, so we should probably create a rule set for header 1 elements. We could style this image if we want. We have a header 2 element. We have an unordered list. We have a link. We don't have any buttons, but this is just what we have right now. This is just so we know what CSS will be able to react to. So to start adding things to our style sheet is called style.css. So that file is right here, style.css. So we'll go ahead and look at this file. There's already one rule set here. The selector says HTML. This selects the HTML element, which contains the entire page and everything in it. This is setting two properties called height and width with values 100%. This makes the element HTML 100% the height and width of its container. And the container of the HTML element is the viewport, which is the window that's displaying the web page. So that just makes sure that your web page is filling up the viewport. So we'll keep this here, but we'll add new rule sets for the elements that we see inside of the HTML element, such as the header, the image, the other header, and the other stuff that we see on our page. So if we want to give the whole web page a background color, we would actually add that to the HTML rule set because we want to give the whole website a background color. Now there's two ways, actually several ways to write colors. You can use a hex code, which uses a number sign and then 6 letters or numbers to specify a color. That's called the hex code. You can use an HSL code, which uses hue, saturation, lightness, and alpha, which is known as opacity. If you want a color or an element to be see-through slightly, you would use the HSLA. Or you could use the name of a color. CSS recognizes several color names. These color names are supported by all browsers, so if you use these in your CSS code, they will be recognized. It also shows the hex code here if you look on W3 Schools, so all of these color names will be recognized. I'm going to give my website a cream colored background. I believe cream is recognized as a color. In Replit, if it's not recognized, the color box will not show up, so I guess that's not a recognized color. Let's use wheat. Wheat is a recognized color. Okay, it is recognized, so the little color box shows up, and if you click that box, you can use the color selector to change your color. And it's also showing you the RGB, which is red, green, blue values of the color. So if you want to change those, you can. All right, and now the whole website has a different background color. Now, if you want everything on your page to also have a different font, the HTML rule set is a good place to do that as well. So all of the text on your page has a different font. Which fonts will it recognize? Good question. A good place to start is to look up web-safe fonts. These are fonts that are recognized by most browsers. On PC anyway. A lot of these fonts are not recognized on mobile browsers. For example, BrushScript MT is not usually recognized on mobile browsers, but a lot of these other ones will be. So you could pick any of those, and other ones will probably work too, such as Comic Sans MS. Some of them may need to be in quotes. Oh, that one worked. Okay. And the classic meme font, Impact. That one works as well. You can choose whichever font you want. If you want your headers to have different fonts, then you'd use the font family selector, or not selector, the font family property or attribute in a different rule set for whichever part of your document you want to have that font. There's another option for changing the background, and that is background image. So if a solid color is a little too boring for you, there's also the option of background image. So the background image property it can take several values. You can either have a URL as the value, and then you can put an image pathway in here, or you can create a gradient. You can create a linear gradient, and and then you list colors separated by commas, and it will place those colors from top to bottom. For example, if I have a gradient that starts at white and goes to black, it will look like this. You can even add multiple colors. For example, maybe I wanted to go from white to pink to teal. There it is. I'm actually going to pick a color that's not quite white. I believe there's a color called smoke. Yeah, very nice. Okay. Now we want to do some special styles for the header, for the top header one. The selector for that would be header one. The styles that we specify inside these brackets will affect all header one elements. Now there's only one header one in here, but I'm going to add another header one element just so you guys can see what that would look like. My dog. I don't have a dog, but I'm just going to add my dog in there just so you guys can see. And a paragraph. So now we have two header one elements that say my cat and my dog, and they should both be changed by our selector here. So let's do certain things to both the header one elements. Say we want to change the text color. That property is called color. Let's find ourselves a dark teal color. Dark slate gray. Pretty cool color. I'm also going to give them a background color so you guys can see what it looks like when a certain element has a background color. Maybe I'll give that one a hot pink. Okay, so now they have slate gray text color and hot pink background color. So the background of the header one element covers this area. You can also use a background image for that as well, but I'm using background color so you guys can see what that looks like. Now I'll show you guys how to make a border. The border property requires three parameters. The thickness of the border goes first. I'm going to say 5 pixels. It's best to do it in pixels. And then the style of the border. Your options are either solid, dotted. Actually, I'm going to show you guys solid first. Solid, dotted, double, and dashed. I'm going to make this a dark slate gray again to match the text. Actually, I think the hot pink is pretty ugly, so I'm going to change it to regular pink. Yeah, that looks better. Okay. So that's what a regular border looks like, a solid border. I'll change the style to dotted. This should show you guys what it looks like. That's a dotted border. Here's a dashed border. And here's a double border. All right, pretty nice. Let's add a border around my cat, which is an image element. Image selects all images, and since there's only one image, that will just select my one image. I'm going to put a border around my cat. Same thickness, different style. Probably the same color, dark slate gray. Okay, that looks pretty nice. So let's try styling this link right here. Things that are clickable on websites usually have hover states to tell the person that is looking at your website that it can be clicked on. So let's make a regular state for this link and a hover state. And we'll remove the outline and give it a background so it looks like a button. The link element is called A, so the selector will say A. This is the link before it's hovered. So to remove the underline, we'll say text decoration none. Now it no longer has an underline, which makes it not look like a link at all. So that's a little bit misleading. Let's add a border and a background color so it looks a little bit more like a button. Okay, now it's got a border. Let's do a background color that has a gradient that makes it pop out of the page. I'll use a lighter color on top and a darker color on the bottom. I'll start with white smoke and end with teal. That looks like it pops out of the page. The text color is still purple, and I don't really like that, so I'm going to change the text color to dark slate gray to match the border. Now the text looks a little bit cramped inside this button, so I'm going to give it a little bit of space by increasing the padding size. I'll talk a little bit more in the next lesson about what padding actually is. But for now, just know that the padding increases the space between the border and the inner content. Alright, now let's make the hover state for the button. Actually, before I do that, I don't really like that all of the text is different colors, so I'm going to make all of the text be the same color by adding a color property to the HTML rule set to make all of the text in the entire document the same color. Now, because of the cascading nature of CSS, I now no longer need this property in any other rule set. Now, all of the text in my page is the same color, except the link for some reason. So I guess I need to put it back into the link. All right. Now we'll make a separate rule set for the link when it's being hovered over by the mouse, which is called a:hover. Now all you need to write here is what you want to change. And what I'm going to change is the border and the background image, or the background color. I'm going to have the background and the border get slightly darker. Slightly darker. Slightly darker. And slightly darker. Yep, that looks slightly darker to me. The white color didn't get darker, so I'm going to pick manually a color for that color to be. Gainsborough is a nice light gray color. Okay, perfect. The button gets darker when we hover over it. All right, try this out. Give your element some colors and shapes, and at least one element on your page should have a hover state. Doesn't have to be the link, but it makes the most sense for it to be the link. Um, Try it out and have fun.